All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Deal with D and J. I'm your co-host, DJ McCatherine, joined alongside my other co-host, Jacob Trail. Jacob, big weekend of football. I mean, not even a weekend, big week of football. Really, tons of bowl games, round two of the college football playoffs. A lot happened. But talk about it. Talk about it a little bit. Talk about your reaction to these to this second round, first of all.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I'm battling out here. I'm giving an MJ flu game level performance in this podcast right now, battling a sore throat. The grind don't stop, content don't stop. So if you have your MVP talks, make sure you include this performance as one of them and as it goes down in history. Um, as it talks about the games itself, you know, I will say probably two out of four were quite lackluster. Obviously one was an absolute classic and the other was a little bit lackluster, but because of the pageantry, it's always like phenomenal from start to end with the Rose Bowl. Um, and I think we'll touch upon this later. And I think we just talk about what does the 12 team like where are the flaws? Because I think we're starting to see a lot of the flaws come out in this bowl system, in this playoff system right now. But overall, I think it was a phenomenal weekend, phenomenal 3 days of football. Um, Especially New Year's Day with that first game being an absolute classic that we saw down in Atlanta.
No, the Peach Bowl was phenomenal. Texas Longhorns going up against the Arizona State Sun Devils. Sun Devils had a first round bye, right? Had to wait to see who their competition was going to be, but had we'll call it the game planning head start to prepare for this game, right? Um, Rather slow start for Arizona State, all things considered. Texas started out strong, 14 points in the first half, or excuse me, the first quarter. You know, scored. Um, they were up 17-3 going into the halftime, and then Arizona State roars back in the second half. The game plan for Texas, that Texas defense didn't hold uh, through the entirety of this game, right? Um, Arizona State Mount started their comeback in the third quarter with 8 points and then 16 points late in the fourth quarter. Right, they drove down with some momentum, and then unfortunately lost in overtime. I think the play that I'm going to highlight in this whole game, there's two games that really changed the complexion in this game. Um, in my own eyes that I saw. The targeting penalty, a lot of people are talking about, right? I think personally it's closer than what people are just blatantly calling like a targeting penalty. Um, when I initially saw it, right, I didn't think it was targeting. I thought that like he didn't bow the top of his head down enough for it to be targeting. I thought it looked textbook. You know, the more that I looked at it, he did dip the head down, but I still don't think he got him with this top portion of the head. And it's that weird in the middle. It's like this forehead area more so that seems to be the topic of discussion. And then in when Arizona State, the second play I have is when Arizona State had Texas at like 4th and 8 in overtime, right? They had an all out blitz, and it was obvious that that's what they were doing. And Quinn Ewers calls an audible and hits a seam route right up the middle for a touchdown. I think that Arizona State's defense needed two plays, right? One was what they inevitably did, which is the all out, go for Quinn Ewers, don't have any time. But as soon as Quinn Ewers points that out, right, and he audibles out of the play, you have to ditch whatever you have, right? whether it's a bluff or not, call the timeout. I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head if Arizona State had it at that point, their timeout, but it is, you can't let that happen on 4th and 12 or 4th and 8, whatever it was. And as soon as Quinn Ewers called it out, I was like, this is either going to be a first down or a touchdown. And it ended up being the touchdown. Texas turned around on the next possession, scored 2-point conversion, and Arizona State ended up throwing an interception, ending their very impressive season. But, Arizona State put a good fight. They never, ever quit in this ball game. And I think they deserve all the credit that they have. Um, but inevitably, Texas Longhorns come out on top and move to the Orange Bowl. Excuse me, no, they move to the what is in Texas here? Is it in Texas?
Sugar. Sugar. No,
No, the Cotton
cotton.
Bowl. They're moving to the Cotton Bowl, so Texas gets to stay at home and go to the Cotton Bowl. But Jacob, talk to me about this targeting call. What did you think of it? What was your initial reaction? And talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it was targeting. Um, I think another big point of emphasis is the defenseless receiver aspect. Um, I think he was quite defenseless. Jesus. All right, I'm good. I'm good. I had to get that last down. He was quite defenseless. Um, Regardless of where it lands on the side of the helmet. If you lead with the helmet, it is should be immediately viewed as targeting.
Mm.
I do think, regardless, hitting somebody like head to helmet contact should be an unsportsmanlike. Just because like we play football, like it's like you can't hit somebody helmet to helmet. We got like you have a little bit of discretion, right, with it, but if it's like a bang bang play like that, and it's not targeting, but it's like forcible contact to the head, like it's kind of hard pressed to not have that, you know what I'm saying? Um in the second aspect, I think Arizona State played enough to stay in this ball game. They played phenomenal. I think it's more so for me, it's Texas' inability to close out games right now is a little bit worrisome. We saw it against Georgia, how the offense looks really struggling. The Clemson game, the offense looked okay, right? Clemson kind of punching a little way out of their league in terms of that matchup. But this is like I'm still waiting for something like Quinn Ewers did something where he audibled out. That takes experience and seeing what you see. But it's also just like I'm waiting for him to also put the dagger in. Like you shouldn't go double overtime with Arizona State. Like if we're vaulting Texas as a top three team like we have all season, this like you shouldn't go to double overtime with Arizona State, regardless of how great they're coached. Regardless of like Cam Scatterbo is an absolute dog. Like my goodness, like some team's gonna get him in the NFL and they're gonna get an absolute gem. Um, day two guy. And with Ewers, it's just like the offense whenever it needs to like put the foot on the gas. Like you get all this momentum from Arizona State, right? Like you got to figure out some way to also like put them in a chokehold as well, right? Snuff out any momentum they get, right? I mean, also like your kicker can't miss two kicks in a row, right? Because he missed the one he got iced and then missed it again to send it to overtime. Did you see the video of the Arizona State ball people like walking across the kicker?
No.
So it was on the sidelines and the Arizona State ball girls. Um, the kicker like is practicing his kicks into the net. And like before he went to go on one of them, the girls like walked in between him. So he had to like wait. and like it was messing up his whole timing and
Oh, no, I didn't see that.
so like small detail, small mind games. But I just like for me, I'm just waiting for Texas to put the dagger in some of these games just because I feel like the offense isn't flowing. That Clemson game feels a little bit like an outlier because like the offense wasn't really doing anything outside of a couple big blue rushing touchdowns, So I'm just kind of waiting to see like when can this team put it into overdrive and like go score at will because they have the talent to go score at will.
Right.
They just, I don't know if it's yours, I don't know if it's the play calling, like something's just like not clicking for me for them to take that next step. Similarly to their opponent who they're going to be facing in the Cotton Bowl, Ohio State, if we want to jump into that game.
Yeah, we can preview Ohio State, Texas.
Not
I
previewing,
mean,
but if we jump into Ohio State, Oregon.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I said it in the TikTok, belt to ass, man. Um, Ohio State. I I don't want to say that I predicted this, but I did not expect this game to go be as blown out as it was. Right. Um, I mentioned in the other podcast that Ohio State's defense, since their first look at Oregon, really stepped up. Right. They didn't. They haven't given up much. You can look at the Penn State game and you can see that they gave up some points, but a majority of those or seven of those points came off of, a pick
A pick
six,
six.
you know, um, and that game should have been more dominant than it was, based on quarterback play. And you said they needed to have the best version of Will Howard to win this game. And by golly, they had just as good, if not a better performance from Will Howard than they did against Tennessee. Um, this Ohio State squad is rocking. Jeremiah Smith is an absolute superhuman. I saw the coolest shot. I don't know how much of this game that you watched, but uh, in his first touchdown catch, you can see him catch the ball down low, right? It's an end zone view, right corner end zone view, looking at Ohio State, coming at him. And you can see the Ohio State fans, half of them are like, yes, he made the catch, right? So it's like one arm up, and then he breaks that tackle, that one on one, and then you see both arms go up. It was the coolest shot that I've ever seen. But superhuman, super fast, super athletic, super strong. And he dared them. He dared Oregon to play them one on one, man coverage. And then they tried to double him and they still couldn't do anything with them, you know. Um, and then you have outliers like Travion Henderson and Emeka Egbuka that just add to the excellence that was that performance. The defense, played phenomenal as well. They didn't let anybody get behind them, right? I think the only thing I could have wished more of, right, is seeing that. And granted, this is a grain of salt. Um, I feel like the Oregon offensive line did really well for what was available, right? Ohio State had 7 sacks in this ball game, but I don't think that's all telling to the secondary that really gave um, Dylan Gabriel nowhere to throw. He had nowhere to go with the ball. So I think Oregon's offensive line did as well as they could for as long as they could. When inevitably, they can't hold them back forever. Um, so it was just a dominant performance through and through. Um, and then, this matchup coming up, man. Um, I mean, if Ohio State's rolling like this, I wonder how much of this playbook they dove into. They got tricky early. I thought it was great that they have in so many games they have relied on that wide receiver screen, or that wide receiver out on the first plays. The Penn State pick six happened on it. Michigan, I believe, had an interception on that little out slash wide receiver screen, and they faked it and had the tight end roll out on a wheel route. It's the little things that I think that they did really well, and I'm wondering how much of that playbook they kind of dove into in order for this, and what is the game plan for Texas? You know, can their defense hold like they can? I think I don't know. I don't know.
I think this was, I got body bagged on TikTok because I made I stood on a take and everyone's like, "Well, look at you now." And it's like, "Listen, brother, like before this game, you could have a conversation with me and everything I said was factual. Maybe minus the defensive part of things because that kind of blew up in my face a little bit. But like before that game, would you rather have Dylan Gabriel or Will Howard? Right.
Right,
And 9 times out of 10, people are taking Dylan Gabriel. And I did say you have to get the best version of Will Howard, and it came out. Right.
right,
You know, and then, you know, Oregon's offensive line did what it could, but you can't stop a pass rush for more than 3 to 4 seconds.
right.
After that, it's barbecue chicken, you know.
Barbecue chicken.
And then it's like, Ohio State did what it did really well with the skill players that they had, and they kind of feel like they seem to unlock something with Will Howard in a small sense. But like looking at it, from a stat perspective, like 7 catches, 187, 2 touchdowns for Jeremiah Smith. Mbuka had 72. Henderson 94 yards on the ground. Judkins 85 on the ground. Um, Will Howard 319, 3 touchdowns. To me, it just is a game changer in the sense of when you have it clicking like that and you can just boat race a team early,
Yeah.
like it's very tough for Oregon to get back into this game. And a point I want to make, as we get towards the end of this, when we talk about the CFP as a whole, is that all these teams that had the bye week all started like super slow. Like they were like shaking off a lot of rust.
Right.
Uh, and I think Oregon was a victim of that in a small sense of shaking off some rust because, Jeremiah Smith jumps out, gets on you early, and it's like, oh boy, like we gotta figure something out. And then next thing you know, you're down 31-7 going into halftime or whatever it was. And it's not exactly an easy thing to come back on. I don't think most people were expecting um this, you know, this to go the way it went. Um, and yeah, I got body bag. It happens. But nobody like I'm not gonna sit here and be like, I'm going to take Will Howard over Dylan Gabriel before this game. Like I'm just not going to. I still probably won't. I think Dylan Gabriel did what he could. And then the Oregon rushing game was just terrible. I mean, minus Dylan Gabriel having negative 43 yards rushing, which might just be all the sacks he's taken. Um, like they barely had between their running backs.
They had 20 yards rushing.
Yeah, they had 21 yards rushing. The passing game was good. They had 299 yards. But I mean, when one team's getting double the amount of yardage that they're getting, 500 total yards of offense to two whatever, 240.
320.
It's yeah, tough game to come back and win on. And um I just think that Oregon, I think, we'll touch upon it probably after talking about the CFP as a whole. But I genuinely don't think we're getting the best version of the college football playoffs anymore. Um, just because it's like all these teams won their conference, right? And we disrespected some certain teams because like they were in a lower level conference, and that's just like Arizona State proved that they they deserve to be there, taking Texas to the brink, right? Oregon
Hmm.
being a Big Ten conference winner, like now they're just, no conference winners are going to the semifinals. Like I'm a little bit like not okay with that in the sense of what's happening here, but it's just the byproduct of like TV and all that. But we'll touch upon it, later after we get through Boise State, Penn State.
My last take on this game was, um, you asked me if in a shootout who was I taking, and I was taking Ohio State. Oregon has not had a defense all season long, all season long. Well, I should say anytime that they faced decent competition, they have given up points. Boise State, Ohio State, Penn State, right? And whose defense did I trust more coming into this game to make a stop? It was Ohio State through and through. And I think really that was the difference maker. But I, again, did not think that this type of outcome was possible um with how they performed. I mean, it was just lockdown. And Dylan Gabriel didn't even do bad. There's
You
299
can't,
yards.
8 sacks is just, you can't survive 8 sacks.
No, and
Like,
I think again, he still passed for well. He passed well. You know, he he had time. He had time. Like I watched his game through and through. He had time in the pocket. He had nowhere to throw the ball. And then he tries to scramble, right? In Ohio State, I told you this as well. Ohio State needed to be able to stop the legs of Dylan Gabriel because that it killed them on third downs in their first matchup. And they put a spy, Cody Simon. They assigned him to Dylan Gabriel, and he was your QB spy, and he came up with I believe it was 3 sacks in this ball game, 2 sacks, and 3 tackles for loss. So Ohio State's game plan um, was just lights out. But now it'll be uh, Texas and Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. But before we move on to the third round, the final four, you mentioned Boise State and Penn State. Why don't you dive into that?
yeah, I think this game kind of went exactly the way I previewed it, which no one's going to give me credit for, which is fine. Um, they stopped Ashton Genty. I mean, Ashton Genty, he had 100 yards rushing, right? But I mean, he had 30 carries for 100 yards, averaged 3 point something a carry, right? He got nothing going on the ground. He didn't have a signature breakout run, right? Which I think is such a huge momentum shift for Boise State. Like if you watch them and anytime they were in a close game, like Genty goes and breaks off a big one, kills the momentum, switches the whole thing. Everyone's juiced up, right? I don't think Boise State also, the defense played well, but Penn State is just it's a very tough team to break down. You can't, they gave up 200 yards on the ground. Singleton had that big 58-yard run that basically put the game away. And Drew
Yep.
Aller, to me, again, less than impressive, but it's also like he's almost in like full game manager mode because like if you're getting 200 yards on the ground, I don't need you to throw for 300 yards.
Right.
He was 13 of 25 for 171 and 3 touchdowns. And the biggest thing that I think Penn State did really well was that they kept Boise State's defense on the field and they kept drives going and they kept plays alive, And the Penn State defense again, got to Madsen, caused 2 turnovers, switched the momentum of the game. And then Boise State got into the red zone like 2 or 3 times and came away with 0 points against a team like Penn State. You just simply can't have that if you want to win.
But what really stood out to me in this game was how early um, Boise State just kind of threw in the cards, right? Um, and with this score, I believe it was, at what point do you think you throw in the towel and then you just try to get Genty that regular season rushing record or that season rushing record? That's a question.
Um, I just I think for Boise State, you look at it in that first drive, you going away with three. For me, if I'm Boise State, you're the underdog. I would have gone for it on what was it like 4th and 2, 4th and 1, or
Yeah,
whatever.
something like that.
Like I got the best running back in the game. Like I'm like I would much rather do that, fall on my sword, and try and get the momentum early. Like I would tell my team that before the game though. Like be like, hey, first drive, we're gonna be aggressive. Um,
I'm sorry, they missed the field goal.
they missed like the kicker missed both field goal attempts that he took all game.
Mm,
So like it's a momentum swing. Like again, it's not that Penn State plays like this is what I said. We'll talk Notre Dame, Georgia, but like Penn State just plays really fundamentally sound, good football. And that's ultimately like all they kind of have to do to win certain games
right.
outside of like when they play teams much better than them. So like it's one of those things where you look back at it with Boise State and it's just like they were great, but Madsen threw three interceptions. Chenti had two fumbles. One of them was a lost fumble,
Hmm.
right? And Madsen didn't play bad, but he didn't play great. And so you look at it, Matson was 23 of 35, 304, but he had one touchdown and three interceptions. You know, I'm Boise State. I think this is the beauty of the 12 team is that Boise State absolutely deserved to be there.
Right.
Um, but it's just an unfortunate circumstance of like you got to go up against Penn State now, and they're pretty much like their kryptonite, just in terms of like how they played. um overall.
Yeah, no, the like I was mentioning earlier, the like the kind of the folding of the towel. I thought Boise State did that early. I think they gave up a little too early. I think it was after Penn State's Singleton's big run that was it Singleton? It was Singleton's big one run, right? Yeah, to seal the deal. Um, Boise State just kind of rolled over. They just handed the ball off for the rest of the game. And I kind of get it, right? But I mean, 17 points isn't impossible, especially down just I know it's three possessions and it would have been tough, right? Now, I'm not saying that it was even possible, but actually that's a lie. I am saying that it's possible. Um, but the just the fold the cards over, I felt like it was a disappointment for the team to do that early. But Penn State, like you said, fundamental football. Drew Aller didn't play great in this game, played good enough. I mean, I don't know how you only complete 50% of your passes. I saw some of the game and I know that he, when plays weren't there, he threw some away, but even then it wasn't fantastic. And Boise State just got dominated on both sides of the ball. Genty good could only do so much for them uh, on the ground. They just Penn State was a more physical team. Um,
My thing with Aller is just like I just don't know. I just keep waiting for this kid to be like otherworldly, and he's just not that. He's not an
mm-mm,
otherworldly talent, and he's not doing anything that really like puts him above and beyond some of these other guys. And it's just like it's frustrating because it's like he's a pure game manager, like
right.
not Like he's just executing the read. He's not trying to go put the game on his shoulder and win, especially when the defense is taking care of things. I think he gets told like you don't need to go win the ball game. Just keep the drive alive.
Right.
Give our guys some oxygen. So I'm interested to see with this Notre Dame game, what's going to happen because him and Riley Leonard are pretty much like two peas in a pod, essentially, with one difference being Riley Leonard runs the ball like 45 times a game. But let's talk Notre Dame, Georgia here. Notre Dame takes down Georgia 24-23. My bad, the 10. Um, I'm not sure this is a game Notre Dame like. This is more of a case of a game that Georgia lost and Notre Dame won, the way I watched the game. Does that make sense?
No, either Notre Dame won the game or Georgia lost the game.
Yeah, I think Georgia lost this game. Like, I
You're
think it
giving
was,
more so credit to the fact that Georgia wasn't as good
yes,
and not giving the amount of credit to Notre Dame. I
right.
think that is just the dumbest thing. I just watched a whole first take segment on that, and I think that is ridiculous. It is
Well,
ridiculous.
hear me out.
All
Just hear
right,
me
I'll hear you out.
hear me out.
All right.
I think for Georgia, this like for me when I was watching it, I didn't think Gunnar Stockton was bad, right? I thought he was good. He was moving around. I think he had jitters at first, but then he settled in. He can sling the ball. The run game wasn't as crisp as you would have liked it to be if you're Georgia, but the
Mm-hmm.
offensive line was Swiss cheese, right? Offensive line was terrible. I mean, they gave up four sacks on the game, right? And then, just the amount of drop balls that
Mm-hmm.
continue to happen with this offense, right?
Right.
I can remember that it was to Bell. It was 23-10, right, at this point in the game. Early in the fourth quarter or late in the third. So it was in between that time frame. Gunnar Stockton comes back, throws one deep,
Yep.
right? And if he catches it and just turns, that's a touchdown.
Right.
23-17. You got the whole fourth, like that's a whole momentum shift to your defense, right?
Yeah.
Right? He drops the freaking ball. Again, just nails, right? Then you have this guy early in the first half running into the referee, like on the
Yep.
side. It's like that guy's not gonna be on this team anymore.
Right.
So like, and then if your Georgia defense, you held them to 240 yards of total offense, right? And
Yep.
like you had like you kept Riley Leonard under 100 yards passing, right? Like
Yep.
the run game kind of a little bit got away from them, but not completely, right?
Yep.
I think it's more so a case of like the offense and the woes that have like plagued them really came out and reared its ugly head at bad times. Because I watched Notre Dame, and I kid you not, DJ, there was probably a good like portion of this game that I was just like on my phone. Like it was not. And if you look at the scoring sheet, Notre Dame had one offensive touchdown,
Right.
right? Now, granted, the kicker did his job and he made some field goals after he was struggling all season. But it's like, you get a kickoff return, right? You get a big time fumble and then you score on the fumble. Like Notre Dame executed what they needed to and capitalized on the momentum. But like outside of those 54 seconds where they got 17 points, like it was a snooze fest of a freaking game. It was so boring. And Georgia, to me, when I was watching them, felt like the better team the whole time. They just like kept shooting themselves in the foot. And it's like, it's like the Eric Andre meme where he, shoots the guy and goes, how did that happen? Because he like it's like Georgia to Georgia. Like, how does this keep happening? And even I don't think Carson Beck would have fixed these problems either.
Mm-mm.
I like Gunnar Stockton's not the reason why they lost. I think he added an extra depth to the team because he could use his legs, but he's not the reason that they lost because they still slung the ball. You just like
Right.
you can't drop 60-yard bombs that are going to change the momentum of the game. And then on the defensive side, like they didn't get any turnovers on Notre Dame and they didn't get any pressure to Riley Leonard. And it's like how like you're Kirby Smart. How do you not take away Riley Leonard's legs as well? So like for me, it's more of a case of like Georgia lost the game that Notre Dame won because like outside of a very small window of gameplay, like I'm not quite sure if I like if Notre Dame really did a ton of things to like go and win this game.
Um, Execution. Execution is a word that people that coaches praise. When you can execute, you can win, right? This Georgia team all year long has lacked execution and relied solely on talent all season long, right? I think they are a bunch of selfish players on this Georgia team that think they can just win because they play for the University of Georgia. And um and that's just not the case. This is not the Georgia of the last 3 years. It is the same coach. These players are not much different than what we've seen the last couple of years, though, right? The 2021, 2022 teams, those were veteran guys, right? Those are players that have been with the program for a while. They stayed and whatever. But this team is still compiled of a majority of at least that 2022 and 2023 season, right? They had a bunch of seniors last year, but there are still people on this team that were coached by Kirby Smart, played with national title contenders, beat the dog crap out of Florida State in the Orange Bowl last year, I believe
Yeah,
it was.
with when they had like 1,600 backups in for Florida
Yeah,
State because everyone
yeah,
opted out.
that's fine. But like this is still a Georgia team that has been and stuck together for a majority with a couple of pieces, funneling out and a couple pieces funneling in, right? There is no excuse as to why the um the execution of this team should have been what it was. There is no lack of talent on this team. Are there positions that struggle more than others, i.e., the quarterback position? Yes, but you know, Georgia's defensive line held up for a majority of this game, right? I personally think. Towards the end of the ball game, they folded. Then you have the secondary that held up really well. Like you said, Riley Leonard only threw for 90 yards. So when you make a team one dimensional, right? And they weren't doing great on the ground either, right? Your offensive line really folded, but that is not a result of a bad Georgia team. Why are we going to give that credit? It's not like they've been folding all season long, right?
I mean, they
Carson
have.
Beck,
I mean, the Georgia defense has been terrible all season.
but they haven't.
I mean, you can look at the Ole Miss game. They got it's
Okay,
just
that's
with Georgia, we fall into this trap. I think you mentioned it because they've been so dominant for so long. We just think they're going to pull it out. And this is the least talented Georgia team Kirby Smart has had in a long while,
right,
right? Like no start. He doesn't have a George Pickens or a Lad McConkey or a Brock Bowers anymore, right?
right,
Um, and defensively, you don't have a Jalen Carter or Nakobe Dean or like you don't have any of these like absolute animals on either side of the ball. And for Georgia, like the run defense, I mentioned it in the preview. The run defense is a real problem for Georgia, and it
right.
really reared its ugly head. They gave up 150 yards on the ground. They gave up 80 yards to Riley Leonard, who is like the biggest focal point of the offense as well. And like you let this guy run for 80 on your head. And it wasn't so much the runs were to like the one thing that impressed me about Notre Dame, and I want to give Notre Dame their flowers because I said it in the TikTok. Notre Dame does what Penn State did, and it was they fundamentally played you to death.
Hmm.
And when you win in all three facets of the game, it's a hard recipe to lose.
Right.
You have to like you crushed them on you sustain drives on offense, right? You had no turnovers, right? And like you came away with points on most of your drives, right? And then the defense, you got turnovers, and with that turnover, you capitalized on the turnover with a touchdown, right? Right before the end of halftime, right?
Yep.
And then, you get to the quarterback four times, which is huge, right? You don't give up a ton rushing, right? They gave up 60 yards on the ground to Georgia, right? And then it was just bend, don't break, right? And then kicker, kicker makes his field goals, and then you take one to the house. You win in all three facets. It's a hard recipe to lose, right?
Hmm.
And it's uncharacteristic of Georgia to get fundamentally outplayed,
Right.
right? With Kirby Smart. And I think Marcus Freeman did a great job with this game. I think the Notre Dame defense, I think, is actually like a real problem. Like it's a very good defense. They don't make a ton of mistakes, right? Um, and like my biggest thing too is just like Riley Leonard also just kept drives alive.
Right.
Third, was it 3rd and 4? Doesn't like what he sees, runs 8 yards, continue the drive, get your guys some rest, right? It was just breaking the camel's back constantly for Georgia. Oh, you can't stop Riley Leonard. Then you go on offense and then you're dropping footballs. And then you give up a kick return to the house. And it's like if I'm Kirby Smart, like I'm pulling my hair out, being like if I'm Kirby, it's like we had these guys.
Right.
And then we didn't play football for a minute of gameplay and we're down 17.
Hmm.
That's the way football does go. But like, I don't want to give, for me in my eyes, I don't want to give Notre Dame a ton of credit in terms of like the offensive side of the ball in like being like they absolutely like if we're gonna have this conversation of dominance, that's not the conversation. I feel like some people are saying Notre Dame dominated Georgia. That was not a domination game. It was just you outplayed fundamental football, and that does win you a ton of ball games. It'll win you a ball game 10 times out of 10.
No, no, I definitely see where you're coming from that aspect, but it's like,
I'm
well,
not trying to sit here and discredit Notre Dame. It's just when I
right.
look at 90 passing yards and 225, like I said in the TikTok, if I just showed you blind resumes, right? And I didn't tell you the score, right? I didn't tell you the score,
Hmm.
right? Who would you think have won this game? Riley Leonard, 90 yards, touchdown. Gunnar Stockton, 225 touchdown. 150 rushing, 60 yards rushing. Four sacks, one sack, one turnover.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, when looking at a blind resume, you're kind of thinking of two teams that did the opposite of what they did. It's like, well,
You would think Georgia.
Georgia passed better, right? But they only had one touchdown passing. Well, they didn't run the ball very well. So where
Not running.
you're just switching it around. Like you're switching what each team did good and the opposite of what they did good, the other team did well, you
I
know?
don't know. In my head, I kept this. I am gonna admit some bias. I kept in my head thinking Georgia will figure it out because I've seen them figure it out
Right.
every single time. And once that guy dropped that football on that, because that play is a signature Georgia play. How many times have we seen the big 50-yard bomb and it
Right.
just it just kills and demoralizes the other team, right? You
Right.
see it when they play Bama and you've seen it when they play Texas. Like, and I just kept waiting for them to figure it out. And it just once he dropped the football, I was like, they're not going to win this game.
No.
It's just you can't survive the mistakes. And Notre Dame played a perfect football game. Marcus
Yeah.
Freeman, I think, is starting to really blossom as a coach.
Hmm.
I think he's not letting these big games like sway. I think he has the perfect message for his team. And, let's jump into the semifinals, the final four,
Right.
shall we say.
Hmm. No,
Uh,
the final four
and
matchups, uh there the Penn State Notre Dame intrigues me a lot, actually. Uh I could see this game going one of two ways. Notre Dame opens up at 1.5 point favorites. Which I think is very surprising, right? Like I understand that you just dominated, I will say dominated a Georgia team because they fundamentally dominated on both sides of the ball. Um, but Penn State has been rolling through these playoffs. They offensively, defensively, they have they dismantled a Boise State run game. Um, SMU, they decimated the passing game for them, which they really needed to if they wanted to win, and they've just shut them down on both sides of the ball. I believe they have the second best scoring margin outside of Ohio State. Um, and it's just hard for me to sit here and believe that Notre Dame is the favorite, regardless of, beating Georgia and beating Notre Dame, which ended up being, not as impressive as a win as we had hoped. But nonetheless, Penn State has really been rolling outside of that Ohio State game. We had mentioned Drew Allard is a quarterback that we don't have a ton of confidence in. But are we going to sit here and say that we have more confidence in Riley Leonard? I don't know. I think that's an interesting topic. Riley Leonard isn't forced to throw the ball a lot, right? Drew Allard has been put in positions to throw the ball, and he has not done great with it. And then you look on the other side of the ball, and you have two defenses that are very, very stout. These teams are very, very similar. So, where are we going to look at the outlier in this game, or what is going to be the outlier in this game? I think the only answer to that question is the quarterback. Riley Leonard versus Drew Allard. Who is going to pass the ball better? Because I think Drew Allard has the ability to run the ball, right? Again, I don't think he does it as much, but he's a big body. He's not quick, but he's fast, right? When he gets his momentum moving, he is very much Riley Leonard-esque. Um, but Notre Dame just doesn't use him as such. Um, so for me, it's Riley Leonard versus Drew Allard in the passing game. That is going to be the key factor in determining who wins this game. Jake, what do you think?
I think for me, I'm looking at the run games more prominently than quarterback play. Just because both teams are predicated on running the ball first, right? For Penn State, it's the two-headed snake of Allen and Singleton, right? And then if you're Notre Dame, it's Leonard and Jeremiah Love, right? And it's, no, they're running the ball great. They're getting what they want on offense, right? Again, I think it becomes like who can execute their offense, right? I think the run game is pivotal. And I think a key, again, the biggest X factor in these playoffs for Penn State is Tyler Warren. You
Mm-hmm.
saw what he was able to do to Boise State, 6 catches, 67 yards, 2 touchdowns, and just had some catches where he was in between the zones. Aller finds him. He's a freak of an athlete, and he can cause some real issues for this Notre Dame team because You're not putting a corner on Tyler Warren. You're putting a linebacker, and the linebacker's not going to be fast enough to play coverage on Tyler Warren, just because he's a freak of an athlete right now. Um, I do agree that Aller and Leonard are huge points of contention. Um, with Aller, it's I think both quarterbacks are going to have to game manage because I think this is going to be a very defensive played football game.
Very
I think
much so.
I think it's going to be Abdul Carter and company. I think it's going to be Notre Dame's defensive line and company. And I think it's going to be who can get to the quarterback the most, slash who can cause like a pivotal turnover, right? I think both quarterbacks may throw an interception. They may even be a fumble, but it's who can get to where they're going to the best. And as we've seen, it seems like Notre Dame has an X factor with special teams, right? Where they ran the fire drill on Georgia, where it was they sent out the punt team, fire drill, ran out the offense, did a hard count, got them to jump, right? You get the first down, like I think that's a thing up Marcus Freeman's sleeve.
Right.
Uh, I'm interested to see James Franklin. Now, James Franklin's in a big game again. And if the kryptonite is Ohio State and Oregon, then Notre Dame should be no problem with the way they've been playing, right? Um, but I just from the offensive side of things, if the run game is super stifled, I just don't trust Aller enough with his arm, not based on talent, but based on like just the sheer accuracy that he throws with. Like he doesn't throw the ball great sometimes, and if he has like he can go kind of win a game, but also like if Notre Dame puts him on locks, like it's going to be a very, very long day for Penn State offensively.
Yeah, I think this is going to be one of the more boring games that we've seen, at least from an offensive standpoint. This is going to be pure Big Ten football at its finest. The only thing that's separating it is neither of them get to play in the cold, right? They're going to be playing in the nice heat in Miami. Um, and you're right. And I think I had said it earlier, but who is going to be able to make the throws when they count? The X factor for Penn State being Tyler Warren, right? Who can you defend him enough, right? Ohio State, the best defense that Oregon's played all year long. He found the holes. Drew Allar was able to make the passes necessary um, in order to stay in the game, essentially, right? Tyler Warren got them all the way down to the 1 or 2 yard line before Igbenogson intercepted that ball in the corner. But again, it's not Drew Allard hasn't been a person who has kept Penn State in ball games, right? Penn State's defense has kept Penn State in ball games, with the exception of Oregon Penn State, right? Drew Allard, I think, played lights out. But again, that Oregon defense has been non-existent against good opponents. Um, so, uh, what do you think of the spread? What do you think of Notre Dame opening up as the favorite in this game? Do you think they jumped the gun too early? I think it's dumb to just have a thing up too early.
I don't think they jumped the gun. I mean, if you watched both teams recently, Notre Dame's defense is playing way better than Penn State's defense
Mm,
in terms of like just a small ass. I think the confidence level is not in James Franklin's favor. I think that's what Vegas is betting is
okay.
James. I think it's not predicated on team performance. I think it's the James Franklin mindset.
Mm.
Uh, that's why I think what they opened up as like 1.5 point favorites, two and a
Yeah,
half,
no, Notre Dame is 1.5 point favorites.
1.5. Yeah. Um, I see that line moving to probably Penn State -1. Um,
Mm.
But I also think with the way they open the line, I don't see it moving out of Notre Dame's favor as well. When I see 1.5, I see toss up. It's a pure toss up, and they're just banking on Notre Dame's special teams potentially
Mm,
to be a small factor like game winning field goal or, you know, something like that. That's what my guess would be. I think it's also predicated on James Franklin hasn't won the big one. You
right.
know, Franklin against like I think like top 10 opponents is like one in whatever. So
Well, yeah, I mean, I think
he's
that
bad.
was all Michigan and Ohio State more than any. But
Yeah, but
but those have been his top five opponents.
those are have been the top teams he's played.
Right,
So like that's unfortunately the suit of the matter, right?
right.
Um, Ohio State, Texas. Let's break that down a little bit here. Um, this game feels like if Texas is slow on offense, this game is over the same way it was over for Oregon. I think Ohio State figured out that they have the best wide receiver in the country in Jeremiah Smith and finally have been like, just throw him the ball. Just give him the ball.
Yeah,
He'll figure it out. Or he's open.
yeah,
Um, I think Will Howard is playing with an utmost confidence right now. I think the run game is just brutal. Not brutal in the sense of bad, but brutal in the sense of, okay, let's say you stop Judkins, right? Uh-oh, Travion Henderson breaks a nice little run off for 20 yards. Then he gets 8. Then he gets 6. Judkins comes back in, screen, goes for 50. Like, you see what I'm saying there? Like, that can just spell you disaster very fast,
right,
right? And like Texas mightily struggled against Cam Scatterbo, right? 30 carries, 143, 2 touchdowns. I mean, Scatterbo also had 99 yards receiving by himself, like kind of absurd. But like, they gave up the whole point prior to this Arizona State game for Texas was how great Texas run defense was. It was like top 5 in the country. They gave up
mm,
214 yards to Arizona State. Now Cam Scatterbo is an absolute animal that can't be replicated.
right,
But you have a two-headed snake of Judkins and Henderson. That's that's a tough recipe to stop. Not to mention, you're going to then have to stop Mbuka and Jeremiah Smith. I just don't see Texas surviving that. And just the way they've played offensively makes me really worried,
right.
especially if Ohio State can get pressure in there early,
Yep.
then it then it's just it's really tough sledding if your name is Quinn Ewers.
Um, yeah. So, just going through, I'm my biggest question mark was how well does the offensive line protect Quinn Ewers? And you want to know the answer to that? It's not good at all. Texas, Quinn Ewers has been sacked 27 times this year. 27 times. Uh, his backup, the early and growing Arch Manning, 6 times he's been sacked. Right? Quinn Ewers has also proven that he is at times not the most accurate quarterback in the league as well. He's thrown 11 interceptions this year. It's it, I don't know. I don't know what Texas does in this game that just hand in hand beats Ohio State. I mean, you talked in the Oregon Ohio State matchup about the matchups that you thought were better. I genuinely can't look at one spot in this game where I can say Texas is better than Ohio State, right? Um, Texas has the talent to be able to beat Ohio State, I think, but I don't think they are better talent wise totally than Ohio State is. Texas has a $20 million squad as well. Everybody can spit that out as much as they want, but Texas has NIL money coming from everywhere, from every oil field. you know, they they're not shy about paying their players either. Um,
I think I just I think for Texas, it's just it's just like Ohio State has all the momentum right now.
yep,
You're basically just playing week by week football, which I want to touch upon when we talk about the CFP as a whole. And the thing is, like the Ohio State defense is playing at its absolute best right now.
yep,
Stopping the run, getting pressure to the quarterback, causing turnovers, slash taking away some of your best options,
right,
you know? And in this game, Texas really had to throw the ball against Arizona because they couldn't get anything going on the ground. Well, I'm not quite sure you're going to get anything going in the air either against Ohio State. I think this can be a boat race in a hurry. I think Texas can get ran out of the stadium by the second quarter. If if
yep,
if their defense doesn't come to play, right? They do. I will say the difference in the secondary between Texas and Oregon is vastly different.
right.
Vastly different. Because Texas does have the best corner in the country. Um, the award winner, his name's blanking me. Oh well. They have a guy. I know he's the award winner. He won best corner in the country. Um, and they're probably gonna put him on Jeremiah Smith. It's gonna be your best against our best. And in college football, unfortunately, it doesn't normally bode well for the corner.
Well, let's just say, for instance, again, this is where matchups and where does Texas, go better? Let's just, for whatever reason, say Jeremiah Smith is locked up. Is Texas's two better than Ohio State's two? Is Texas's three better than Ohio State's three? Right? People forget about Carnell Tate over there, right?
Mhm.
He's a dog. He's just not in the limelight yet. Emeka Egbuka is the probably most reliable receiver on this team. Not the fastest, you know, maybe not the most athletic, right? Fundamentally sound wide receiver, finding the zone, finding openness, maybe not the receiver you can just say toss it up and go get it. But again, he's slick on his in his route running, finds the open zone, and just knows how to beat people. Um, and I think that's where it really comes down to is I don't see uh, I don't see a team, especially not Texas right now, that beats um, Ohio State right now. The only question mark I would have, right, if I was going to raise one, is how does Texas's defensive line go up against Ohio State's offensive line, which the offensive line is the weakest position through and through for Ohio State thus far, right? They have boded well against Tennessee and Oregon, right? Oregon got some key pieces that they had missing in their first game, and Ohio State's offensive line still did really well. I thought the run game for Ohio State could have been better, right? Cravion Henderson, I think he had 90 yards, but he had a 65-yard touchdown run or something like that. So, he had 30 other yards on the ground. Judkins was more consistent with 85 and, what, seven or 10 touches, whatever it was, which is good. But, I think this defensive line for Texas is going to be different than Oregon and Tennessee both. Um, and Tennessee's defensive line um was their highlighted position, like what they were good in, and they got dominated. So I really do think for the offensive line. Ohio State's offensive line coach still has his work cut out for him. He needs to find ways to protect Will Howard and get the run game going. But like you said, and I said this in another game this year too. Ohio State is the only team that does not need the run game to be going for the pass game to go. And I will stand on it. If Ohio State bailed on the run game against Michigan and decided to throw the ball, I think they would have. I think they could have uh, blown Michigan out. They just were gun ho on trying to get the run game to go. But in the last two games we've seen, you don't need the run game to get going in order for the passing game to get there. You can get your momentum started through the air. So, if you give Will Howard enough time and the receivers can get separation like they have all season long, I really don't see anybody and not Texas stopping Ohio State. But do we want to give score predictions for these two games?
Yeah. I'm gonna go Ohio State 37, Texas 31.
Okay, you're going
I
with
think
the
it'll
odds.
be I think it'd be closer than people think. I think Texas gets a couple late touchdowns, try and like chip away at it, but I think it's gonna be Ohio State fully in control. And then I'm gonna go Notre Dame 24, Penn State 17.
34-17 Notre Dame,
20, 24, 24, 24.
24-17
Yep.
Notre Dame.
Yep.
All right. Um, okay. I liked your prediction for Ohio State there. Ohio State over Texas. I think I'm gonna go. I was jumping between 35 and 38 for Ohio State. I do like the aspect of a couple field goals getting in there. But I'll probably go 38-28. I could maybe even see 38-21. I can see the spread getting that much. I could also see it being a little bit closer of a game. Um, and maybe this defense steps up and it turns out to be like a 28-14, 28-17 ball game. But I'm going to go Ohio State 38, Texas. I like the late touchdown too, so I'll go 28 for Texas. And for Notre Dame, Penn State. So I actually had an interesting take during this game where I thought they were going to try to line up Big Ten SEC for these Final Four. I thought the recipe was there for it. It's what both conferences, are looking for, these automatic bids into this playoff format, which just blew up in at least the SEC's face, right? Um, and I thought if Georgia lost or Georgia won and made it through Penn State or even vice versa, Georgia made it and Texas made it, that that they wanted that Big Ten SEC national champion, and we're obviously not going to get that now. Or we could get that, but not the way that I was looking at it. And so I really don't think people want a Penn State Ohio State rematch. Um, but with my first take being thrown out, right? Georgia didn't get any favors in that game against Notre Dame, except for one PI call, which I very much disliked. But I think Penn State gets through this game. I think it's going to be low scoring, like the Georgia Notre Dame game was. And I'm going to go Penn State 21. Oh, yeah. All right. I'm going to go Penn State 21, Notre Dame 17 in my predictions. I think my first one was going to be 23-20. I'll throw that out there as a maybe, but 21-17. Penn State's going to make it, and I think we're going to have an Ohio State Penn State rematch. Two coaches. Headline's going to be crazy with the big games. Which coach can get it done? But I think that's going to be the ball game for the national title.
What an episode.
What an episode. A lot gone over. A lot still to cover. NFL coming to an end. NBA is starting to heat up. We just saw a lot of
College basketball starting to get in the mix here.
college basketball. March is coming very, very quickly. Jacob has been covering Worlds for hockey.
World Juniors.
Junior.
Yep.
Um,
I did one game
uh,
because the other games haven't been like that crazy, but the US play Czechia now and Sweden versus Finland. So those are classic matchups.
yep. So we're gonna bring you some more sports here in the next podcast. And Jacob, any final thoughts? All right. Well, thank you for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe. Follow us TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. We do need to be better on Twitter and Instagram. But for now, TikTok is rolling pretty consistent. And let us know what you guys think. Thank you for listening to The Deal with D and J.